Why do you think the left is dying on this hill? I friggin' don't get it. And I know you're a former liberal. I've heard you say it. So am I. So are most of the people that I relate to these days. But they've ejected all of us with this insanity. Why are they doubling down here?
They have nothing to offer the American people. They desperately want power back, but they only want it back because they think they deserve it. They don't want it the way Trump wanted it because he had a theory of the case, how to fix this country. He had a very clear idea of what he thought the problems were and how to fix them. The Democrats have no such theory of the case. They are the beneficiaries of everything that went wrong. The Democrats are now the party of the wealthy. So if you look at the data, 65% of Americans who make over $500,000 a year now are Democrats. 9 of the 10 richest counties in America, Democrats. 75% of Silicon Valley donations, 75% of hedge fund donations, 95% of donations that come out of the top 3 management consulting firms, Democrats. Wall Street picked the Democrats over Donald Trump 3 election cycles in a row. And meanwhile, Donald Trump keeps increasing the share of, the GOP that is represented by Hispanics, by Black people. Trump won the majority of Americans who make under $100,000 a year. Now, when I said that this was happening 5 years ago, they tried to cancel me. Yeah. And this week, the New York Times had an article about it, and there's this like odd feeling when all the journalists who tried to cancel you are retweeting an article saying what you said that was like considered to be criminal. But basically, this is the problem, is like the Democrats are now the party of the rich and the party of the elites. And so they like policy that puts money in the pockets of the elites, like an open border, because then they can hire, all of these illegal immigrants to do jobs that they would have had to pay an American a better wage and health care to do, like watch their children or cook their food or do their landscaping or clean their toilets. So they have lined their pockets with the proceeds of their policy. And now they have to dig down and double down because they spent 10 years saying that the only achievement Donald Trump had was a tax cut for the rich, even as the rich kept voting for the Democrats and all the working class people of every race was flocking to the Republican Party because they saw, they hate Republicans. It's not about the Republicans. It was Trump. They saw that he had an agenda that was going to make the American dream once again achievable for the working class. And that agenda is very simple. If Democrats really want to find their way back, he literally stole the New Deal Democrat agenda out from under them. He's not a social conservative. He's a social moderate.
Right.
So, for example, safe, legal, and rare for abortions, there's one politician in America who holds that view, and his name is Donald Trump. So, of course, Americans are like, oh, yeah, he thinks what I think on abortion. Economics. We should have a tight labor market because it puts money in the pockets of workers. And we should have tariffs because it brings factories back. This used to be obvious to Democrats, and now it is obvious to Trump. And then on foreign policy, it used to be the Democrats who are anti-war.
Right.
Now the Democrats want to fund this war in Iran forever and ever and ever. And it is Trump who is saying, not another war, not on my watch.
In my own line of work, you talk about being canceled 5 years ago. I think I got nailed in 2019, right before COVID, because everybody was saying you could be healthy at any size.
Right.
And that was kind of my awakening. And I've watched narratives in my area of expertise flip the script. I just reposted something, or was it the same journalist at CNN was attacking Trump on hydroxychloroquine? It was like, the studies don't bear out. This is moronic. This is anti-science. This friggin' journalist put out another article just a few years later about how there was a study that suggested hydroxychloroquine was a good therapeutic in treating COVID. The same frickin' CNN journalist. On one hand, we could be healthy in any size is being put out there by the media. And then all of a sudden, we've got GLP-1 drugs, and now obesity is a disease that we've got to treat. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I'll do you one more. We're starting to see, and I do need to touch on this Jake Tapper thing with you, because me and Megyn Kelly are the only one that are firmly focused on Jake Tapper unto himself, because these cover-ups wouldn't be allowed to happen if the media wasn't complicit. But what's so crazy is you'll see them going, well, these medications, that Biden would have probably been on for prostate cancer, whether he has Parkinson's or not, they can cause Parkinsonism, symptoms that are similar to Parkinson's. Now, hold on. Gender affirming care puts children on the same freaking drugs. Lupron. Like, you can call them off-label cancer drugs, you can call them chemical castration drugs, but when it applies to kids, it's gender-affirming care, and no one sounds the alarm on the damage that these drugs do to a developing brain. So I want to validate it from my wheelhouse, same thing, and it's infuriating. But I want to push back on a couple of things because I feel like I'd be irresponsible if I didn't. I personally feel I wish that abortion would be legal, safe, rare, and have a timeline. In my opinion, on this continuum of 0 to birth, like where there should be a cutoff date. With that said, he did effectively put Supreme Court justices in place that rolled this back in certain states. So I can't fully exonerate him from that. I think he's responsible for that.
But that is more democracy, not less democracy, right? Because then in each state, you can have a referendum, which they did, and they had a bunch of them were voted down, right? So in Ohio and Kansas, which are both red states, like solidly red states, they put a referendum on some version of the heartbeat bill, and they were voted down by Republicans who said, we don't need this, Like that's
but they
more
didn't
democracy.
In, like, Florida.
And
I get it. And you know what? I hear you. Let
me just make this point.
You're right.
Roe v.
I'm sorry.
Wade
Go ahead.
was far to the left of where 80% of Americans are at. So I agree with you. There should be a cutoff at some point. You know what I mean? Like there's like a very obvious kind of like civilized. It's probably like 12 to 15 weeks, right? I mean, there's kind of like somewhere around there,
12.
somewhere after that.
I mean, when you
unless you're like
12.
you have some sort of like medical necessity, obviously. Like, at some point, third trimester, it kind of starts to feel like murder, right? Like not in the beginning, but like right at that, right. So like that, but that's where most Americans are. So 65% of Americans who call themselves pro-choice think it should only be legal for the first trimester. And 92% of Americans who call themselves pro-life think that there should be exceptions for and the mother's health.
You're saying we're closer.
So there's like a total overlap. There's 80% consensus on 80% of the issues. Trump personally is exactly there, but Roe v. Wade was way to the left of that. So, I think honestly it really hurt Republicans more than it helped them.
I totally agree with you.
But that was not a great law. It's not a constitutional right to have an abortion. It's something that should be decided at as local a level as possible, because that is how democracy is supposed to work. That's sort of how I feel about it right now.
My struggle with it personally is just that if I'm a woman in Florida and I've got 2 kids, and I've actually had this happen to friends, let's just say because I would argue for agency too. Use birth control, be careful, whatever. I've seen the condom break. I've seen, I've had friends who've gotten pregnant with an IUD. If you are a woman working 2 jobs, you don't have a ton of money, you don't have the luxury. You don't catch it until week 7. You don't have the luxury of flying to another state. This is where like these extremes I struggle with. I wish there was some sort of common sense boundary around this. But at the same time, I would also argue to people who go all the way to the pendulum swings all the way to the other side. Like, hey, you know what? Why don't you do a little research into how they abort a child after a certain period of time? It is gruesome. And I will leave it at that. And I just wish people could. I love the fact that you're pointing out how close we actually are versus how far apart we seem. And
actually, we're getting more conservative on abortion, not more liberal. It's very interesting. It's funny, when I was traveling the country, like interviewing working class people for my book, Second Class, the most common view I heard from women was, I am pro-life. I would never get an abortion, but I would never take that choice away from another woman who I wouldn't judge like what she's going through. That's where most Americans are for somewhere between 12 to 15 weeks. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And then after that, it's really... Right, exactly.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like, comment, subscribe. and share. And make sure to let me know what guests you want to see on in the future.